The key is to keep challenging your brain with new and varied tasks. Spend one day on a language and another on music, or go out to see a show, or do an escape room, or even travel. Traveling is one of those amazing things where we're actually learning through whole body experience. It's important for your cognitive health to travel, meet new people, try new foods, experience new experiences. Welcome to the Longevity Show. This is your host, Dr. Hillary Lynn. Myself, I am a Stanford-trained physician, board-certified in internal medicine, and now practitioner of longevity medicine. In longevity medicine, a topic we talk a lot about is preservation of all parts of your health, but especially your brain health. And why is that? I like to talk about the why because it helps people understand the efforts to which we go to protect our brain health. If we think about it, what is quality of life? Quality of life is enjoying life the way we want to. So whether that is spending time with our loved ones or working on grand projects or solving big problems, or even simply just sitting in front of your TV and binge watching all the latest shows. These activities all require our brains to be in tip-top shape. Maybe a little bit less if you're just watching a lot of TV shows, but you do need some element of cognitive reserve. So cognitive reserve is what we refer to that when we're talking about keeping our brains sharp. So we'll be diving into the best interventions for preserving brain health. And some of these are going to be very recognizable to those of you who have watched my prior episodes. Of course, physical exercise. Cognitive training is an interesting and new one. And then there's dietary modifications, as well as general lifestyle changes. And throughout, I'll make sure to keep it actionable and practical so that you can start implementing these today. As I am a longevity physician, I do have a lot of patients who are looking to lose weight in a healthy way as well. In fact, I want to say something like 90% of my patients, they are dealing with healthy weight loss management. So that is absolutely a big part of longevity health. We unfortunately live in a world where the food tech, as I call it, is working against us. Evolutionarily, we were never meant to battle the types of additives and processing that food goes through. Now that we are in this world, this modern world, it's an arms race basically. So we're trying all to fix our diets and eat better, and yet the foods that we're dealing with are so addictive. So I find that that's really difficult, but it's a challenge that is made a little bit easier with some of the newer medical interventions that we have. I'm always for doing lifestyle changes first, being healthy first, but sometimes we do need a little bit of assistance with some well-proven medications. And of course, many people here have probably heard of or have used a GLP-1 agonist or GIP. So those are medications like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy. So they're really helpful, and it is related to our topic today about brain health, because I have a longevity health clinic, and interestingly, about 90% of my clinic is made up of patients who are also looking to manage their weight in a healthy way. And weight management is a huge part of longevity, not because of the number on the scale, but because adipose tissue or excess adipose tissue, that's the fat that we carry, can be harmful, especially if it is in our organs. It is pro-inflammatory, and it can lead to also hormone imbalances. It's a vicious cycle. If you have hormone imbalances, that can lead to issues with gaining weight or not being able to lose that adipose related weight. And that vicious cycle just promotes more and more inflammation, more visceral weight gain, and that leads to aging and decline. So that is very relevant actually to our cognition, our brain health, because our brain is part of our body. You may have noticed, if you are somebody who has started a GLP-1 agonist, that once you started, your brain seemed a little bit clearer. And we are still fully understanding why in studies this happens, but I have seen it in dozens of patients, if not more. Some people, they don't even realize what's going on, but I have a lot of patients who have recognized that this is the effect occurring, and then they tell me like, wow, this Zepbound or this Ozempic or this Mounjaro, it seems to be doing something more than simply make my body weight a little bit lower. It's also helping clear my brain fog. It's really interesting. We believe it has to do with the anti-inflammatory nature of these drugs. So this has been more studied in mouse models and animal models, not yet fully studied in human models, but there's no reason, we believe, that we should be that different in terms of the anti-inflammatory effects from mice. So as a result, we have the theory that the anti-inflammatory nature of GLP-1 agonists helps us with fighting brain fog. So it is relevant to brain health to some extent. Our brains are simply a part of our body, and when we have something like brain fog, that is actually a signal to us that there's something going on that isn't great. So our brains are there to be a signal. Our brains are detecting whether there's an insult to the body. And sometimes that's in the form of a toxin, or sometimes that's in the form of inflammation. So when the brain detects inflammation, it cannot respond as quickly. It kind of has this sluggish feel to it. Some people describe it as feeling almost stoned, like as if they were on a drug like marijuana, because you just can't think as clearly. You can't remember things as well. Learning can be a little bit harder as well. And this also deeply impacts our mood. So people with mood issues as well, that can be linked back to our brain health. Our mood and our brain is so tightly intertwined. I mean, this is a philosophical topic, but some people fully believe that our mood is in our brain. Our mood and our brain are one and the same. There are, of course, factors from the rest of the body, hormones and neurotransmitters that are affected by our are impacted by our environment, are also impacted by, of course, our experiences, past traumas, current traumas. But all of this gets translated into hormones, neurotransmitters, and epigenetic changes to our body. And so it's almost like if you are an engineer and you know there's the general software where you're engineering some software at the higher level, but then there's like machine code where you're telling the computer to do a certain thing. So our bodies have also different levels of code, the front end, the back end, the machine code, every bit of it. It's very similar, in fact, to a computer machine. So I bring that up because that is the reason why when we want to preserve our cognitive reserve or our brains, we need to think about whole body health. It's not just about doing tricky little puzzles or Sudoku. That will basically just help you get better at Sudoku. You need to take care of your entire body if you want to preserve your brain health or even improve your brain health. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is like a mental savings account that we're building throughout our lives. The more we deposit into it, the better we can handle the challenges that come with aging. But how do we make these deposits? So the answer lies in a very multifaceted approach, like I mentioned. It's a whole body approach. It includes physical exercise, cognitive training, diet, and lifestyle changes. So we're going to go into each of these today and break them down. First of all, physical exercise. This is one of the most powerful tools we have for maintaining cognitive function. So much research consistently shows that regular aerobic exercise like brisk walking, running, rowing, swimming, something that gets your heart up for a consistent period of time can really enhance brain plasticity. So that is your brain's ability to learn, to adjust, to shift. So how to understand brain plasticity. So if you've ever talked to somebody who is perhaps a little bit older or, not so healthy, and you notice that they're just so stubborn, they can't seem to learn new things. It's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So that's what we're talking about when we need to really up the brain plasticity, is that we want to be able to teach any dog new tricks, and that's our brains. Our brains are like that. If they are healthy and plastic, then they can learn new things, new habits. It's not even about learning like a big topic like math or physics or calculus or anything like that. It's about learning new events. So even meeting someone new. So people who have trouble remembering new things that occur in their everyday lives, that's because there's a decline in your brain plasticity. So we need this throughout our lives, even if we're not learning a brand new topic, for example. So aerobic exercise not only enhances brain plasticity, there's a process involving BDNF, which is a molecule that is like the Miracle-Gro for the brain. It also improves blood flow to the brain. So blood flow is important because it carries with it nutrients. Nutrients, everything from oxygen to water itself. Your brain needs water. It props it up. The cells need water. You cannot have a dried up brain. It will not function. And also the proper electrolytes, neurotransmitters, so on and so forth. There's so many nutrients that need to be carried to the brain. Our brain needs energy. It needs nutrients. Energy as well, the types of energy that your brain likes, glucose, ketones, lactates, so on and so forth. And so these are really important. This is why you need good blood flow to the brain. We also need to reduce inflammation, and that is done as well with aerobic exercise. So like I was mentioning in the prior example, where a lot of my patients have been noticing that GLP-1 agonists decrease their inflammation and therefore reduce their brain fog and improve their ability to think clearly. Exercise does a similar thing. So exercise, of course, is a little bit more active for people. And so people, complain to me all the time. I know that there's a struggle for a lot of people who are not used to exercising to really get going. But it's the high intensity exercise that really does the most for your brain. So that's getting your heart rate up to near your heart rate max, coming back down and going right back up again. We've spoken about HIIT exercises or interval training where you get your heart rate really high up and then down to a more slightly elevated period and then go back and forth. That can really pump up your brain's activity, your brain's health. But it doesn't simply stop there. So resistance training, like lifting weights and mind-body exercises such as yoga and Tai Chi, are highly beneficial. There's growing theories about this because the studies are definitely clear that this is true, that the more resistance training we seem to have cognitive benefits. The theory behind it is that when you do things like lift weights, you are actually extending neural pathways to your muscles to train to understand how to lift that weight properly. So actually, your body, it's very much an extension of your brain, or your brain is an extension of your body, or it's all one and the same. Essentially, when you are strength training, you're curling, you're deadlifting, you're squatting, all these things, they're pretty complicated for your body to figure out. So when you do resistance training, your body is learning and it's growing these nerve endings to help your muscles work better. The mind-body exercises, for those of you out there who are a little bit less intensive at the moment and you want to ease into it, I would definitely still recommend any kind of movement, and even restful restorative movements like in yoga and Tai Chi. These are also highly beneficial because you are still moving in a way. Dancing, for example, that's a really great activity for brain training. And it's because when you are moving in these complex ways, you're trying to balance. Balance is actually incredibly difficult for the brain to figure out. And you can see that in certain people. For example, if anybody has ever used alcohol overly much in the past, or perhaps no one knows somebody who has, alcohol damages many parts of the brain, but one in particular is the cerebellum. And what we see long-term effects of that. People stumble around. Even if you're not currently drunk, it can degrade that part of your brain so that you're imbalanced. And that same part of your brain is so important for many different aspects of your life. So actually, your cerebellum is the part of your brain that can tell the passage of time. So our cerebellum does so many things. It helps us balance. It helps us with certain things like positioning, but it also helps us feel the passage of time. So if you feel ever like the passage of time is really slow or suddenly really quick, then that is your cerebellum at work. I know I feel that. I'm not much of an early morning person. So when I get up in the morning, it feels like time's just passing so fast because my body is working at a slower pace. That's my cerebellum doing that. And then by the end of the night, I'm just rapid fire because that's my time. I'm more of a late night owl, and time suddenly I can do so many more things in a single minute. And so time really is relative to our experience. So it's really, really interesting. You should try it out if you haven't. Just feel for yourself, when does time feel slower or faster? An obvious example might be when you're sitting through a really boring lecture. Hopefully not this one. Time feels like it's passing just ever so slowly. You're watching water boil, something like that. It's going to feel like it's passing so slowly. But when you're in an engaged environment, say you're watching a fantastic movie or you're hanging out with your best friends or your kids and you love hanging out with your kids, then time's going to fly by and it just feels like it's racing through. That's because time for us is truly relative. Piece on exercise. What I would recommend for your actionable tip that you can start today is start with 30 minutes, simply 30 minutes of aerobic exercise, at least 3 times a week. If you are new to this might be a short walk after meals. That's a great time because you're also going to process your glucose from your meal properly that way. So get up after you eat, or even, sometimes I'm standing and eating because that also helps. You're actively metabolizing all that glucose as you're taking it in. And then, or if you are someone who are really getting started and need something low intensity to get started, a weekly yoga session, hot yoga perhaps, can be really great. But you have to understand your own body. Don't do the walking and the yoga just because you're feeling a little bit lazy and you don't want to push yourself. If you are somebody who is already a little bit stronger, then push yourself. You always want to give yourself an extra 10% is how I say it. So if you feel like you can do a 5-minute jog, then do a 5.5-minute jog today and maybe a 6-minute jog tomorrow. Or if you're somebody who runs, I'm on the treadmill and I do the miles per hour shift for the treadmill speed. And most of the time I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 7 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. And it pushes me. But every so often I'm like, okay, I'm not fully worn out. I'm going to bump it up to 7.5 miles per hour. Or like if I'm feeling really great, then it's 8 to 8.5. I think once I got up to 9 and I'm like, okay, this is really fast for me. I felt like I was going to fly right off the treadmill. But that's the idea, is that you want to feel your body and then push yourself 10% more. Of course, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to damage your joints, your muscles, and so on and so forth. It's about that challenge. That's actually the amount that's best for your body, your muscle growth, and your brain health. So that is a concept that I'll bring up often for longevity and health in general, which is hormesis. It's challenging your body so that you can push yourself to be more resilient and stronger in a certain way. It's also the same idea behind strength training. So that's the reason why you don't just jump to 200 pounds on your deadlift or something like that when you're just getting started. It's progressive overload. So you want to do a little bit more than you did the last time. And even if that's 2.5 pounds, like not even joking, you can go up by a pound or 2 each time. With those tiny little plates, if you'd like, that is the way to go. You don't want to injure yourself by overdoing it all at once. That's not what you want to do, because if you get an injury, then that sets you back a lot. Always work with a professional if you are somebody who is new to exercising as well, because then they can help you with what I believe is the most important thing as well when you're learning strength training, which is form. So once you've gotten the hang of it, then you can do it on your own, and I encourage you to. But learning proper form is so important so that you don't get injured. So now let's talk about cognitive training. So this is more along the lines of doing puzzles like Sudoku and Lumosity and memory challenges and learning a new skill or hobby. So I encourage people to do more real life cognitive training. What do I mean by that? So it's kind of like with food. We talk about supplements and we talk about food a lot. So when you take supplements, that's like making it easy and convenient. You want to have a little pill that helps you get a particular nutrient that you aren't getting enough of. But it's not actually the best way to get that nutrient. It's always better to get your nutrients in food form. So what do I mean by that? It's that if you're going to get magnesium is one of those things I do encourage many people to supplement with. But if you can get it through deep green vegetables and other types of food, that's even better. Your body actually understands how to absorb nutrients from food much better than it can from supplements. So you got to mix and match. Same thing with cognitive training. The more you are out there and doing things, the more your brain is going to get stronger and resilient in terms of its brain health. So, for example, if you're doing Sudoku a lot, you're going to get really great at Sudoku, but you probably aren't going to be as good as at building a financial model for a business, or maybe even giving a talk in front of a lot of people, or even remembering people's names. So these are all different tasks. You have to go through real life, do real life activities to build real life brain resilience. So don't just do the puzzles. I love puzzles. So anybody who knows me knows that I love escape rooms. I've done over 200 escape rooms around the world. And I recently lost count, and it's one of my desires to go back through all my records and emails and really count up all the escape rooms I've done, because I know for sure I have more than the 230 or so that I currently have written down. But long story short, I love them because it's whole body puzzling. It's not just sitting at a table doing puzzles. I don't love those types of puzzles, actually. I don't do puzzles on my phone or even on the computer. I find that too isolated from context. I love going in full body wise, figuring things out, doing tangible puzzles, working with other people. It's the same reason why I love building businesses. So I've never been one to sit down and read textbooks from cover to cover, because I just love the act of adapting the knowledge that I have learned from places like med school and training and the continued studies that I do to applications. So treating patients, teaching people like all of you who are listening to me right now. So these types of exercises and application are incredibly important to help you build your cognitive ability and also preserve your cognitive ability. So the actionable tip here is dedicate 15 minutes a day to something that is mentally stimulating and challenging for you. So whether that's learning a few new words in a foreign language, something like Duolingo, maybe it is something as simple as Sudoku for you, or learning a musical instrument. Try it with a group of people to be even better. We learn better amongst other people. And this is true almost across the board. There's a few types of folks out there who are isolated learners or get distracted when they're around other people. But the key is to keep challenging your brain with new and varied tasks. Mix it up. Spend one day on a language and another on music, or go out to see a show, or do an escape room, or even travel. Traveling is one of those amazing things where we're actually learning through whole body experience. So that's why travel is so enlightening to people. It's not just for fun. So the next time someone tells you, oh man, you're taking so many vacations, tell them you're training your brain. So it's important for your cognitive health to travel, meet new people, try new foods, experience new experiences. So let's dive in next to diet. What you eat has profound impacts on your brain health. The main types of diets that have been associated with better cognitive health and lower risks of neurodegenerative diseases are the Mediterranean, DASH, and MIND diets. So I don't even need to get into all of these in detail. They all have a few things in common that you should remember. These diets emphasize plants like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and they also emphasize lean proteins while limiting saturated fats and sugars. After doing a lot of these talks and educating my patients and reading a lot of papers, this across the board will get you so far with health and longevity, not just for the brain. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, lean proteins, fatty fish as well. Some of the diets emphasize more fatty fish and the others do not. It's not that you have to eat fish. If you are vegan or vegetarian, you can get algae forms of omega-3s. It's the omega-3s are so helpful for their anti-inflammatory effects for your brain, for your body in general. So all of these diets are rich in antioxidants, rich in anti-inflammatory foods. That helps protect your brain cells. The actionable tip here is to just incorporate some healthy swaps. So you don't have to revamp the entire diet if it feels like a huge deal to you. Although sometimes that's even easier. It's just I go through my cabinets, my fridge, and I chuck it all out because I'm like, I need to reset. That's actually something I'm thinking about doing because I have upcoming travel, and I'm like, this is a great opportunity because I need to get rid of some old food anyways. I may as well get rid of the unhealthy foods that are in my life. And those of you who, if you're like me and you care about the environment, I always feel bad about throwing away food. You can compost it, and you could also, of course, if you're traveling, give it away to a friend. So incorporate more healthy foods into your diet by first adding a serving of leafy greens like spinach or kale to your meals. And swap out fatty cuts of meat for lean cuts of meat. So I'm not against meat like beef because I actually think that it's a very rich source of protein. You can get so much protein in a very small portion of beef. So for those of you who are watching, you can see the palm size of meat. That's going to be 20 to 30 grams of protein in about a palm size. And actually, depending on the thickness, it can get up to 40 grams. So it really depends, but red meat is not necessarily bad depending on how fatty it is. Actually, there's some debate about whether red, referring to the meat, refers to the fat. And, for our intents and purposes, I'm talking about non-fish, non-chicken type meats are mostly what we call red meats. It's not necessarily bad if you go with the leaner cuts. My preference is to go for game animals, so such as venison that's been, harvested in a humane way. It's really, really lean. You get a ton of protein in it. It's just a simple few bites already gets you 10 grams. But you can also go with fish. So fish is very fatty, but it's a good type of fat. It's the omega-3 rich fats, unsaturated. Really great for your brain. If you're not somebody who likes fish or you can't get access to it, get your fish oils or the algae-based or some kind of marine source of omega-3s is going to be bigger bang for your buck. If you're trying to get omega-3s from flax seeds and other plant sources, just know that you're going to have to consume so much of it that it's not actually realistic for just about anybody I know, unless that's 90% of your diet to get enough omega-3s. So if you don't eat fish, if you're vegan, that's totally fine. Go with the algae version, the seaweed version. Those will have omega-3s for you as well, whether through supplementation or just eating a massive amount in your food source. And you don't even need to have that much fish. So a serving of fish a day is sufficient for the vast majority of people. If you're not able to get it every single day, that's when the supplementation comes in. So these small changes can make a huge difference to your brain health over time. Also, I don't want to forget to tell you, hydration is essential for your brain health. So remember, we talked about blood flow to your brain. Your blood needs fluids. And most of us, we've got well-functioning hearts, luckily, so we can pump up your fluids to your brain at all costs. That's what our hearts are meant to do. We need to get the blood to the vital organs, including the brain. However, the lower your blood pressure, or say if you are somebody with heart failure, it's going to be a little bit harder to pump up the water into our brains. So just be aware of that, and you may need to talk to your doctor about different types of medication. I know I have some patients with POTS. You need to work with a physician to get the right medications so that your blood pressure isn't failing you. And in vital times, say you're standing up, you don't want to be fainting. You can cause severe injury that way. You can get concussed. And that is a topic we've spoken about before. It's really severe and not good for your brain to be injured. So make sure you're drinking water throughout the day for everybody. Let's talk a little bit more about other lifestyle changes beyond exercise and nutrition. We also need to stay socially engaged. I spoke about this. But relationships with others really stimulates our brains. We are social creatures. Human beings are social creatures. We also need to get adequate sleep. I've spoken about this countlessly, so I'm not going to go into it in vast detail, but you need adequate sleep, and you need to go to sleep at the same time and get up at the same time in an ideal scenario. We also want to avoid harmful substances. So smoking and alcohol come to mind as the most common toxins out there for our brain. So if you are not somebody who smokes, you already are winning. I know there's people listening who love their alcohol, and so just know that there's no amount of alcohol that's good for your brain. But if you love it, just know it and figure out your priorities. If you need it to feel good in your social situations or it's a part of your culture, I understand. I have a lot of patients and I have many friends who still drink alcohol. I myself have chosen not to drink alcohol anymore. And it originally felt a little difficult because I live in New York City. It's a drinking culture. And yet I feel that there is a cultural shift happening. There's a lot more people who are what we call sober curious. And so people who are sober curious, they're trying out alternatives to alcohol. Sometimes that's drinking a mocktail, or for me, I just go with sparkling water or tap water. It's totally fine because the mocktails, honestly, they're sometimes delicious, but for me, they're a little bit too sweet, and I'm careful about that as well. Actionable tips for you. Make sleep a priority today. Set your schedule. That's the number one thing that you could probably do no matter who you are and what you do. I know a lot of people have challenging lives. You may have a really busy family life as well as busy work, but you do need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. If you don't get that, you will burn out, you will run down, and it will impact the people around you, your work quality as well. It will also increase your stress to a level after some time that, well, I don't need to tell you, you probably have experienced it. Speaking of stress, we want to reduce stress through mindfulness and meditation practices as well. Like I mentioned, having good relationships is so key for that. Social groups, social engagement are incredibly important as well. Incorporate practices such as breath work into your routine. So breath work, this is a really interesting topic. I fully admit that there was a time where I just felt like breath work was very woo and I was not into it. But I have since learned that there are certain practices with breath work that are a little bit less quote unquote out there and can truly benefit things like your brain health and mood. So slow and diaphragmatic breathing, for example, has been shown to enhance autonomic regulation, improve your cognitive performance, and reduce your stress. So techniques like slow yoga breathing, mindful breath awareness, and even just simple deep breathing exercises can help you manage stress and improve your cognitive function. So even right now, as you're listening to me, you can try practicing slow, deep breathing for 5 to 10 minutes. You're just listening to me, so hopefully you aren't running around, or even if you're running around, take a minute and just take 5 to 10 deep breaths. Extend that if you can to a full 10 minutes. If you can extend it to 15 minutes, you probably will feel a dramatic shift around that 12-minute mark. I noticed this for myself as well. If it's really hard for you to slow down your breathing, you can practice counting for your breathing as well. So one practice I do is box breathing, where you do 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, and 4 counts out. But actually, it's that exhalation, that long exhalation, that seems to calm us down even more. So inhaling slowly is not necessary. You can inhale quicker, hold briefly, and then just exhale over 5 to even 10 counts. So sometimes I do, I just pick a number, 6 counts, and we all count a little bit at different speeds. So it's not a big deal, whatever number you pick. And you just breathe out through your teeth, like or through your lips. And that can help you breathe slower. This actually helps slow down your heart in a very intentional way. And it can help increase something called heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is exactly what it sounds like. It's how much your heart rate changes from moment to moment. And it's a good thing. if you have a higher heart rate variability or HRV. You can measure that with something like a wearable, an Apple Watch, or an Oura Ring. All these things will tell you your heart rate variability. Deep breathing will also reduce your stress hormone levels, cortisol levels. So that will lead to better emotional control and cognitive performance. So yes, breath work can truly help. And hopefully that was a deep, restful respite from this fast-paced podcast. Next, one of my favorite supplements. I wanted to dig in deeper to creatine. You might be familiar with creatine as a supplement for muscle building, but it also has significant benefits for brain health. A lot of people ask me, what is going on? Like, isn't creatine this peptide, this small molecule that helps you build muscle? How on earth can it also help you with your brain health? It's because it assists with energy. So it enhances energy throughout your body, which is why it can help with the muscle building, but it also enhances your brain bioenergetics, and it provides neuroprotection, especially under conditions of metabolic stress like sleep deprivation or hypoxia. So this week, for example, I am slowly adjusting to go to Asia starting on Friday. And as a result, I've been getting later and later and later with my sleep every night. I'm a little bit sleep deprived because it's a little bit harder for me to stay asleep in the morning. I did adjust I have these automatic opening and closing blinds. I adjusted the timing of that, but I'm having some IT issues with my home and my lights still pop up too early in the morning. So anyways, that's just a little bit of tech issues interfering with my health concerns. But as a result of the sleep deprivation, I'm focusing on getting a little bit extra creatine. So creatine gets into your muscle pretty easily. So you can take just 5 grams a day if you're looking for muscle performance. But for cognitive you probably have to increase the dose a bit more. And that's because it's a little bit harder for creatine to get into your brain compared to the muscle. So I recommend to people take 5 grams twice a day. Or if you're a larger person, or if you just want to push it and you don't feel any which way on creatine, like it doesn't give you overly much bloating feelings or GI symptoms, then you can take it 3 times a day. The purest form of creatine monohydrate tends not to cause as much in terms of bad side effects for people, but there are still people who every so often complain about that bloating or GI issue. So I don't want to say that this is for everybody. It's just a very useful tool if you're somebody who struggles from sleep deprivation or loss, or perhaps you're a shift worker or you need to travel a lot. Studies have shown that creatine can improve cognitive performance, enhance memory, and even protect neuroprotection against excitotoxicity and oxidative stress, which are common in neurodegenerative disease. So this makes creatine particularly beneficial for older adults and those at risk of cognitive decline. This is important to point out because we know through endless studies and attempts to solve the problem of dementia that it's far better to prevent dementia and mild cognitive injury before it happens. Once it happens, we have a theory that it's either impossible or exceedingly difficult to reverse, unfortunately. So before the onset of dementia, even the earliest versions of it, I would climb back to even your 30s, your 40s, certainly your 50s and 60s. You're going to be wanting to tackle the causes of brain stress, brain oxidation, and also cognitive decline very, very early. So make sure you're exercising, make sure you're eating well, sleeping well, have great social relationships, and you can use supplements such as omega-3s or creatine, and also to some extent magnesium we've spoken about, but that also helps your brain with its function. So talk to your provider as well, and whether it's 5 grams or 10 grams a day, I think it's an important and really easy and pretty safe supplement across the board. We don't see dramatic problems with it. I will note one thing, which is that creatine, one of its byproducts is creatinine. And if you are getting a blood test, standard panels will include creatinine as a measure for your kidney health. Unfortunately, if you're taking creatine, that can sometimes bump up your level of creatinine. I know for me, it doesn't seem to. And I'm like, maybe I'm not getting enough creatine. But in a lot of people, it does bump that up. And it might frighten your doctor because they'll be like, oh my goodness, why is your creatinine jumping up? Do you have acute kidney injury? Is there something going on? Let them know you're taking creatine and ask them if they would test for cystatin C instead. So that's a different lab that tests for your kidney function without needing to rely on creatinine, which can get altered with the creatine supplementation. All right. So we're coming towards the end of today's episode, but I did want to touch on a more advanced topic because I personally have had a deep amount of experience with this drug. So ketamine. Ketamine is well known for its use as an anesthetic, but when used properly, research does show that it has potential benefits for brain health, particularly in neuroprotection, antidepressant effects, and cognitive function. I want to say upfront that this is not something that is for everybody and certainly not for most people. I find that ketamine is most useful for people who are suffering from deep depression, PTSD, and have the support of loved ones and a trusted physician. So don't do this on your own. I don't recommend ketamine in a recreational sense. It's not quite as addictive as many addictive drugs, but it can be psychologically addicting in that it does make you feel better. So a lot of people want to use it more in this euphoric recreational manner. That's not the type of usage that I'm promoting here. This is hand in hand with a physician provider. Optimally, it would be in their clinic if you're doing an IV or IM administration. Sometimes you are able to do it in a less clinical setting with oral, such as sublingual formats of ketamine. And I've had experience with that and have seen dramatic improvements in people's mood. It's not meant to be forever. So there's people out there who are starting to prescribe their patients long-term use of ketamine. And that's not something that I promote either. There's a couple of problems. There's the potential for abuse, of course, but there's also potential effects on the bladder. So there's cystitis, which is a fancy word for bladder inflammation, and it almost feels like a UTI that won't go away. So that can come with ketamine recreational use, which is another big reason why I tell people you have to be very, very careful with it. Not to mention, if you are taking ketamine in an unsupervised setting, it is pretty safe in terms of breathing. You're not going to fall asleep and not wake up in that way. However, if you are in a body of water or, if you're otherwise impaired in a way that you can't take care of yourself, it at high doses is an anesthetic. So you want to be careful. You want to be in the right setting if you are undergoing ketamine treatment. Okay, warnings aside, I am very optimistic about what ketamine can do for the right person. It has been shown to protect against brain injury. So people who have brain injury due to physical trauma, or also in my work, it's emotional trauma too. It enhances synaptic plasticity. We talked about plasticity before. So ketamine promotes BDNF, that miracle grow for your brain, and enhances plasticity. So the learning that your brain is able to do is improved. The rewiring of your brain is easier with ketamine. Now, I don't want to say that ketamine is the only thing that does this, because we see this to a small amount with classic SSRIs and also with more classic psychedelics like psilocybin and with other drugs. There are suggestions in studies that this occurs across many folds. And like I mentioned, you can also get increased plasticity with more exercise. So it's not a ketamine only thing, but it does enhance it. And we have a period of time of enhanced plasticity when we have people on ketamine treatment, when it does seem to be helpful to promote things like counseling and therapy, positive influences. So people who, for example, have undergone ketamine treatment, we will often tell you, please surround yourself with positive influences beforehand in preparation. You want to journal, you want to prepare yourself, talk to your counselor, your therapist, your coach. And then you have the ketamine treatment, during which you are listening to music, eyes closed. It's a very, very different experience. It's not anything like the way people use it in a recreational fashion. You are eyes closed, you are meditating essentially, and you do have internal visuals, but it's not something where you're walking around and having hallucinations like that. So And then afterwards, the integration, talking again to your support person, your counselor, your coach, your therapist, to help understand what you saw, integrate that into your life, and hopefully move on as a more emotionally resilient person. Ketamine has also been shown to improve certain cognitive domains in individuals with treatment-resistant depression. And this, I suspect, is because depression, unfortunately, is so harmful to the brain. Depression actually makes our learning and memory worse, and you can't think as quickly. It's just overwhelming. Those of you out there who have experienced depression know that it's not a small thing. It's not simply, oh, I'm having a bad day or I'm just mad at everybody. It's deeply profound when you have true clinical depression. And you probably have felt how that takes over your life. It's hard to break out of that shell when you're in a deep depression. And that's the kind of person that something as dramatic as an intervention like ketamine can help. So it's a rapidly acting intervention. So that's another reason why I think it's a good option for people for whom other things have not worked. If you have tried SSRIs, that hasn't worked, Wellbutrin, antipsychotics, and none of these things are working, then ketamine can break through the treatment resistance. You can also talk to your physician about other interventions. This is not the only one. This is just one of the more acute or fast-acting interventions. You can do transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, as well. And you can do stellate ganglion injections. There's a lot of different types of interventions that are a bit more involved that could help a person suffering from deep-set depression or PTSD. So in summary, today we talked about the best interventions for preserving your brain health. And again, to review, those are regular physical exercise, cognitive training, particularly through real life experience, and adherence to brain healthy diets like the Mediterranean diet. Lifestyle modifications that address your heart health, social engagement, and proper sleep hygiene. These strategies will contribute to maintaining your cognitive function and reduce the risk of neurodegenerative disease. By also considering emerging strategies like supplementing with creatine, magnesium, doing breath work, and even interventions like ketamine-assisted therapy, you can take a proactive and comprehensive approach to brain health. Remember that building cognitive reserve is a lifelong process, and the actions you take today will pay dividends for the years to come. So what steps can you start taking today to build your cognitive reserve? Go ahead, take a walk or jog, pick up a new hobby, start learning a new language, or add some vegetables to your plate. Every little bit will help you in building a resilient brain that will serve you in the future. So thank you again for joining me on this episode of the Longevity Show. I hope you found these tips and insights helpful. Longevity isn't just about adding years to your life. It's about enhancing the quality of those years. You can find me typically Monday through Friday live on Noon Vibe. I record all of these and post them to my YouTube channel at Hillary Lynn MD as well. You can find me at hillarylynnmd.com. So until tomorrow at noon o'clock, thank you.